insurance change? That's a lawyer. He'll get it. He'll take it. So today we're talking about a king, a donkey, and a mindset. That's where we are today. So we need a bigger podium. Anyway, so it's Palm Sunday, and as we read through the lectionary lessons this week, you see the story of Jesus coming into Jerusalem. And this is the beginning of what the church calls Holy Week, right? And this is a roller coaster of a week. This is it has the highest of highs today, and or in a way, today is this super high, and then by Friday, Jesus is crucified in front of all of the disciples. Have literally scattered. They're nowhere to be found. Judas has betrayed Jesus and ultimately commits suicide. Peter denies Jesus and runs away because he's scared for his life. Almost all of the disciples, and we'll talk about this next week, except for women, were staying there, and then John stays. But that's about it, man. I mean, it is a bleak moment at the end of this week. To start out with a day like this, to start out with a day of Palm Sunday and what we call the triumphal entry of Jesus as King, the whole thing changes in a matter of days. From this excitement, from this is going to be good, from we really have hope, from this could turn out all right, to, oh my God, it is worse than we ever thought it would be. Are you with me? They think, many of them, finally there is a Messiah figure that could actually be the king. Finally there's one who could actually do the things that we've hoped and believed for. Now, as we enter into Holy Week, I think we have to make sure that we understand that the Jewish understanding of Messiah was not a monolithic or just one-way idea of what the Messiah would do. There were different kinds of Judaisms that were going on in the culture of Jesus' day. There were the Sadducees, and there were the Pharisees. There were different sects. There were the Essenes. There were the Herodians. There were Jewish people that were just basically Jewish by birth and didn't really worship a lot at all. There were Jews that came to the temple a lot. There were Jews that never made it to the temple because they were in diaspora. They were spread out. And so we have to be very careful that we don't just say Jews thought that the Messiah would do this. No, it's like this Jewish sect hoped the Messiah would look like this Jewish sect hoped it would look like this Jewish sect was hoping for this. Some of them were very militaristic, right? Zealots that wanted to take up arms and kill Roman soldiers and go to battle. There were some that were like the Essenes, that were like monks. They literally went out into the desert places and they lived. This is where we found the desert sea scrolls were from, like in Qumran and stuff like that. Those are from those types of people. That sect was saying you got to pull away from the world, not be a part of it at all, because the holiness of God will not come into the earth unless we remove ourselves from that type of empire and that type of institutions and those types of people. Are you with me? There were Sadducees who didn't believe in resurrection. There were Pharisees who believed in resurrection, but also believed in an apocalyptic ending of the Messiah that would come and do the work and become a Jewish king. There's all kinds of different ideas that are going around. Are you with me? But as Jesus has been working miracles, and as Jesus has been traveling, especially in the Luke narrative, Jesus, the whole narrative basically moves towards Jerusalem. That's what the whole book is kind of is going. It's like we're headed towards Jerusalem, right? Something's going to happen in Jerusalem. Something's going to happen when we get there. Just wait. And on the way, Jesus is healing, and Jesus is loving, and Jesus is eating with people, and Jesus is forgiving sins, and Jesus is healing the sick, and with Lazarus, he's raising the dead. Are you with me? And all of these things are happening, and the word spreads throughout the area that this could be the Messiah. Now, that meant different things for the Sadducees, it meant different things for the Pharisees, it meant different things for the Essenes. Are you with me? But most of these groups, a lot of these groups, people from each group were starting to look to Jesus as the one that could actually bring peace and be a king. Are you with me? And so we start in the first lesson. We're going to go to Philippians here in a minute because that's where I want to end. But the first lesson is actually in Luke. And this is in Luke chapter 19. And it starts in, I can't remember where we started. It doesn't matter though. Don't worry about it. We'll figure it out later. All right? So Jesus, look at what happened. Right before this, Jesus tells the disciples, go into town, you're going to find a donkey. And it's tied up, and then untie that donkey and bring it to me, and I'm going to ride this donkey into town. Right? And he says, if the master asks, or if the owner of the donkey asks, what are you doing? Just say, our master needs it. All right? Which is kind of a weird story. So they walk in, and in Luke's narrative, they just say, the guy asks, he's like, what are you doing? Right? You're taking my donkey, right? And they're like, well, the master needs it. And that's it. And they walk away with the donkey. In Matthew's narrative, Matthew is kind enough to represent the disciples saying, we'll bring it back. But in Luke, they don't, which is interesting. It's interesting. You can figure that one out on your own. But then they brought in the donkey to Jesus. And after throwing their cloaks on the colt, they set Jesus on it. And as he rode along, people kept spreading their cloaks on the road. And he was now approaching. As he was now approaching the path down from the Mount of Olives, the whole multitude of the disciples began to praise God joyfully with a loud voice for all the deeds of power that they had seen, saying, blessed is the King who comes in the name of the Lord. Peace in heaven and glory in the highest heaven. You see it? Let's go on. This is Philippians, and we'll get to it. Just leave it right there. No, that's right. No, just leave it right there. So, here is this entry of Jesus into the city. He's riding on this donkey, and the disciples and the multitudes are gathering around, and they're laying down their cloaks and their coats, and they're waving palm branches, and they're saying, glory to the King, the one who's worthy, who brings peace. Right? You see it? And this is, it seems like, a direct kind of, what Luke is making Jesus look like is the anti-Caesar. Are you with me? Jesus is the anti-Caesar. So we have several ways that we can look at this. I read a paper, it was about a 20-page paper that a lady wrote, scholarly work from a seminary, and she said, you know, there's two ways that scholars have looked at this Lucan passage of the triumphal entry. And they read into it either that Jesus is being the anti-Caesar, the anti-Rome, and is establishing his basileia, the Greek word for kingdom. He's establishing his kingdom over and against the kingdom, the empire of Rome. Are you with me? Are you following along? All right. So we know, have you ever heard of the Pax Romana, right? The peace of Rome. So Rome was granting peace to the empire. And that peace was granted by the Roman Empire through the Caesar. Are you with me? Many Caesars were a deity and were worshipped in the Roman Empire, throughout the Roman Empire. And so what they would tell you is they would, by the way, there's a word that they would use to pronounce Caesar when Caesar would come back in from conquering their foes. And this was a word was euangelion. Euangelion. That euangelion is where we get our word evangelical or evangelist or something like that. The euangelion means good news. It is a pronouncement of good news. So these euangelions would come out every now and then, and they were pronouncements of what Caesar had done to provide more peace for the empire. Are you with me? Now, what happens is the writers of the Gospels, gospel is also good news, which is also the word evangelion. And if you start to look at what is happening in the narratives of the Gospels, what they're doing is they're taking Roman language that was reserved for Caesar, and they're saying the good news of Jesus the Christ. He is the King who brings peace. Now, are you with me? Now, do you see how that could be a little bit subversive politically in the Roman Empire? When they're using, it's like, okay, fine, we'll take your words and we'll just put them into Jesus, and we'll say Jesus is the one who brings real peace. Jesus who has a real kingdom. Jesus is the one who is really pronouncing the evangelion, the good news, the gospel. It is not from Caesar. It is not from Rome. Our peace comes from the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. Are you with me? Now, that'll get you killed. Right? That'll get you killed. Because you're saying, back then, you don't say, look, none of this good comes from Caesar. None of this good comes from the Roman Empire. Whatever is good, whatever is beautiful, whatever is holy, whatever is right, whatever is true, comes through Jesus, the Christ. I like to say the Christ instead of Jesus Christ, because Christ is not his last name. Right? Christ means the anointed one, right? The one who has been anointed by God. Or it can also mean Messiah, right? So Jesus, the Christ, is the one who brings peace. Is the one who is the King. Another way of looking at this is that this isn't really a triumphal entry at all. Scholars have looked at this and said, you know what, Jesus is riding a donkey. Jesus isn't riding a war horse. Pilate earlier in this story enters into the town with on his white war horse, right? And people are declaring the good news of Pilate and the Roman Empire. And then Jesus rides in on a donkey. And here comes this little sad donkey who's coming in, and people have their coats out. And really what he's riding to is his death, his execution. The Roman Empire is going to win by the end of this week. That the other scholars have looked at this as a real humility of Jesus. That Jesus comes in and is not trying to say or be subversive in any way, really. But he's really just trying to say that the humility of how we live in this world is the point. That we don't come in on our horses saying, we're better than you. But we ride in humbly on donkeys and say, I'm willing to lay down my life and be killed. The question is this. Do we focus on the king? Do we focus on the donkey? Or what is it? Anti-Caesar? Is it humility? And I would say to us, it's both. And maybe it's both. Maybe in the living parable what Jesus is doing is, Jesus is saying, I am, in a living parable, the anti-Caesar. I'm offering a better kingdom. Are you with me? I'm offering a better way that doesn't kill our enemies, but lays our lives down in humility. Are you with me? That maybe this king, maybe this kingdom is a new way of looking at how we enter into the world and what it means to be fully human in that world. Maybe Jesus is humbling himself. Maybe Jesus is saying, I'm going to ride in on a donkey, which is not a horse or a beast of war, but it is a beast of burden. It is a symbolic of humility and peace. Jesus didn't come to wage war with swords and to kill his enemies, but Jesus came to say, I will allow my enemies to kill me because I love you that much. And I will humble myself. Are you with me? Maybe it's both. Maybe what Luke is saying is, listen, Caesar, you're not all that. And there's a better way. Maybe it is extremely subversive. Maybe it is absolutely saying that Jesus is the anti-Caesar and that the kingdom is not from Rome, but the kingdom is from God. And that peace doesn't come because Caesar gave us peace, but because Jesus the Messiah is willing to, on the other side, humble himself and become the scapegoat and die for the sin of the world. Maybe it's not either or. Maybe it's both and. And then we go to Philippians 2. And in Philippians 2, 5 through 11, this is called the Christ hymn. Now, note this. Paul, when he writes this to the church at Philippi, he is quoting this hymn. This is a hymn that this is within 50, 60, AD. This is 50, 60, probably right around there, right, Robbie? That's not much later than 60 AD. So this is just literally 25, 30 years past Jesus' death and resurrection. Are you with me? This is fresh. There's a lot of people that were still alive that witnessed and bore witness and was around, and they've heard the stories. They were contemporaries of what Jesus did. Are you with me? And Paul, so what we know about this Christ hymn is that this hymn had already been circulating among the worship of Jesus as the Christ. Are you with me? And Paul used this, and there's still to this day, scholars fight over where this actual hymn showed up or where it came from. But Paul is saying this was already in the liturgical worship of the people that were following Jesus as Messiah. Are you with me? So Paul takes this thing and he speaks about the mind of the Christ. And look what it says. And then he says to us, let the same mind be in you. Say this with me. I'm going to say it. You repeat it. Let this same mind be in me. Go. Let this same mind be in me. Let this same mind be in you, simplicity. Let this same mind, the mind that we're getting ready to see, the idea, the mentality, the mindset of the Christ, let that same mindset be in us. Are you with me? Watch. Who, though he was in the form of God, did not regard equality with God as something to be exploited, but emptied himself, taking the form of a slave. Now see the juxtaposition of the form of God, now the form of a slave. Not just the form of God, but now a form of human, but actually the lowest kind of human you could find, the most marginalized, the weakest, the most vulnerable. We're going to go from the form of God to the form of a slave. Are you with me? That's the mindset. Being born in human likeness and being found in human form, he humbled himself and became obedient to the point of death, even death on a cross. Therefore, God also highly exalted him and gave him the name that is above every name, so that at the name of Jesus, every knee should bend in heaven and on earth and under the earth, and every tongue should confess that Jesus Christ is Lord, to the glory of God the Father. This would have been a hymn or a liturgical prayer or praise that almost maybe sometimes every week as they gathered they would say this thing together. Let us have the same mindset. Let us have the same kind of what mindset? That says we don't take our privilege and our places and our positions of honor to exploit them and exploit others, but we lower ourselves to serve all of creation. Are you with me? This is not an easy ask. This is not an easy mindset, because it means that we have to begin to have a mindset that says that others are as important as I am, that others are more important than I am, that I will surrender my own personal needs many times to meet the needs of those who I come into contact with. Never not taking care of yourself, but always being aware that there are other people in the universe besides you. Dr. Maurice Brubaker, who was my intro to theology professor last year, she said this at orientation one time, or the orientation that I went to last year before I started my classes, and she said this. She goes, it's important to learn that people aren't bit players in a movie about myself. She said it's important to remember that the people in my life aren't just actors that are there to accomplish whatever purposes I believe are this thing that I'm living, this life, which is really just a grand movie about how wonderful I am. I don't treat you as a bit player. I don't treat you as a pawn. I don't treat you as someone other than me. I treat you as me. I also recognize that I treat you as Christ in you. Whatever you've done to the least of these, you have done unto me. That means that I don't look at you as someone outside of me or outside of Christ or a thing to make my life work better, but I look at you as Christ, serve you as Christ, humbling myself for my own positions of privilege and honor and power and authority. Are you with me? That's not an easy ask. That's not an easy ask. It means that we've got to get on a donkey sometimes when we want to ride a war horse. It means that we've got to be made the victim sometimes and be willing to do that so that we might save those around us. All right? Do you see what I'm saying? That's the heart of Christ, is that I love you too much to make you serve me. Jesus to his disciples at one point actually says, we are not like the Gentiles who in their authority lord it over others. But we take our towels and we wash feet. Are you with me? It's really quiet in here. You guys are all right? It is really quiet. It's like, this is... All right, let's make it worse. Here we go. In one of the commentaries that we're reading for our New Testament class this semester, there's in the commentary on Philippians 2, 5 through 11, the writer says this. I'm going to read this paragraph. Forgive me for reading the paragraph, but this is rubber meeting the road. Are you ready? Hearing the exhortation to share in the divine kenosis and Paul's political... Kenosis means the self-emptying. The thing where it says, I did not look at this authority as a thing to be grasped and exploited, but I humbled myself, right? All right, that's what Paul is saying. You have the same mindset? Kenosis is the idea. Everybody say kenosis. Kenosis. It's the idea of self-emptying. It's the idea of humbling yourself and serving others. All right. So, hearing the exhortation to share in the divine kenosis, and Paul's political discourse about citizenship may challenge churches today to reflect on the broken U.S. immigration system. By the way, before you think this is in response to what's happening right now, this was written in 2014. Those who wish to immigrate legally wait decades for permission. Others fleeing economic desperation arrive only to live in fear of being separated from their U.S.-born children. Undocumented immigrants are often denied legal rights because of their limbo status. They don't belong here or there. And children who arrive at an early age grow up thinking that they're Americans, only discover they don't have access to the same firsts as others. First job, first car, first generation to go to college. Paul is not writing political policy, but advising a church how to live in a state that values some residents over others. This could have been written yesterday. Even more relevant this year than maybe in 2014. But still the same human problems, amen? The same problems of valuing some over others. And yet the mindset of Christ on Triumphal Entry Sunday, on Palm Sunday, is not that of saying some are good and in, and others are bad and out. It's saying we will show a different kind of kingdom, with a king who rides in on a beast of burden that is a donkey of peace, and not on a horse of war to say some are in and some are out. But we are here to say there's a new way, a better way, that says everyone is loved, welcomed, radically affirmed in who they are. And we will not say to young couples, if you don't get married this week, don't come back. Amen? In Philippi, I think that's the first time anyone's clapped for anything I've said. Did we get that on tape, dude? Oh, it was what Mike said. That's true. That's true. Thanks, Robert. All right. Burst my bubble. I'll finish with this. In Philippi, Paul levels the playing field. You are all citizens of the Christ. Churches today must reflect on Paul's pastoral approach to holding a community of differently documented members together as one body of Christ. Let's stand.